one of the things that you're all speaking to, that if you permit me to kind of, draw out, is that representation matters, that it's important that we increase the number of Black and Indigenous and people of color who are represented within picture books, as well as other identities, LGBTQ, gender identities. But the stories that we tell when we do that are also important. So for me, and I think, this is what you all are saying, is it's not only increasing who is represented within multicultural picture books, it's also expanding how, to allow for there to be multiple different types of representation that we can all encounter as mirrors and windows when we pick up a book, so that we can see that, the multitude of experience that exists for Black and Indigenous people, for instance, that we may connect with as members of those groups, or we may not, and expand not only our understanding of ourselves in our place within the world and what we can achieve, but then also expand our reach and our conceptualization of what that social identity group is beyond maybe our own unique particular experience. So for me, my passion, or my hope, is that we will increase the numbers of who, but also expand the how in a myriad of ways, so that we can capture the rich dynamic humanity that's present within each group, can be represented within a picture book.
And can I add too, and just allow for these rich conversations to emerge with children about these things, right? And allow us to talk about similarities, but then talk about differences, and then just use this again to push this narrative forward about how important and how beautiful and how necessary diversity is, just for improving our society in general.
Mm-hmm. One thing that, kind of building on that, is this, this idea of how children are represented in STEM, right? Or in STEAM, when we think about it, when we think about arts and the sciences. And, part of what we do at the Diverse Book Finder is we've collected and cataloged over 3,000 books that have been published since 2002, featuring Black, Indigenous characters and people of color, so BIPOC characters. And we have a unique tagging system that allows us to both represent and track who is being represented and how. And so I took a quick look at our data to think about how are children being, our BIPOC characters being represented within the STEM literature in particular. And one thing that stood out to me, JaNay, relates to your comment about whether cultural context is present within the book or whether it's not present within a book. And when there is no, when there's a BIPOC character in a book and there is no specific cultural context, we call that an any child book. And that's a book that makes a BIPOC character the star, but doesn't necessarily, it is portrayed visually, let's say with skin tone or specific cultural elements, but don't make those cultural elements part of the storyline. They could be removed or changed without affecting the storyline. Then there are also beautiful life stories, which are books that feature BIPOC characters and then make those cultural elements a central part of the storyline. The former, any child books within the STEM literature featuring multicultural characters, there are many more any child books within this category than there are books that feature specific cultural elements, or books that we would call beautiful life books. So I'm wondering if you can kind of talk a little bit more about maybe the choices that you made within this space. And some of, because I'm sure you encountered this and grappled with this when you were planning your books and executing them and revising them. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about this and why, maybe what direction you see your book as representing here and why you chose that particular approach.
I could start. Krista, I wonder, is there sort of a hybrid of the two? And what I mean by that is, for example, in my Too Small Tyson, it's about Black brotherhood, and these brothers are working together. And this will be depicted in the illustrations. However, some choice of language, for example, might coincide with how African American individuals speak in America. And so while they're not necessarily highlighted, right, there's still kind of this integral piece of the story. And even in, I'll give another example, my book, Grandma's Tiny House, it's a Black family. They're all coming together to celebrate, but we get some ethnic foods. But the ethnic foods are not the focus of the story, right? Even though they're an important piece of that. So I don't know if you would classify each of those within the two, or if they would be more of sort of a hybrid or an in-between. I don't know what your thoughts are about that. But
well, I mean, without classifying the books, I think it's more. I introduce the language as just a way, maybe to think about how you think about your books in this area and how you interact with this space and kind of think about the decisions. And JaNay, it sounds like your thinking is for it to be a mirror, an accurate mirror, where a child can say, hey, that's my family. That looks like, what we do. That's us. But where it is, where that's not, central to the storyline. And that may be how you kind of think about these interesting elements that come into play. And I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong within this context. I think it's just interesting to think about the choices that we make and how they impact why we do it, why we make those. As someone I'm not a picture book creator, I'm really interested in hearing some of your thoughts on that. Art, I see you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that with this book in particular, it's centered on a young boy who is making marbles for the game of Cherokee marbles. And when you think of marbles, you might think of those little things we used to throw in the schoolyard, but Cherokee marbles are more like, a lot of times people use like a cue ball from a pool table. So it's that size. And some of them, people make homemade ones out of stone, and they actually form them and decorate them. And that's what in the story, he's making some marbles to sell at our big national. We have a Cherokee national holiday at Labor Day every year. It celebrates our signing of our Constitution. And so it's a big festival, and there's powwows, and there's all kinds of booths where people will sell crafts. And so anyway, my whole book centers on the experience of this family getting ready to make crafts for their booth, and the little boy is making his contribution. Now, I suppose you could have, put it in a different cultural context, and the family could have been working toward, something else, a flea market or something like that. But, for me, I thought it was really important to show that so much, for a lot of Native people, so much of life centers on, making crafts, maybe going on the powwow trail or going to a festival. And so I thought that was really kind of a cool way to look at STEM and everyday life for American Indian people. And I thought it would really resonate with both American Indian readers, and then non-Native readers would get a little glimpse into maybe day-to-day life for a family.
Yeah, and also how to a container for the marbles, right, is central to your book, and really thinking about the volume. And you chose
right.
the Cherokee basketry to focus on that in that book, yeah. Which is really interesting.
Yeah, and I just the way that the family is described in their house, and the way that they were scrambling around looking for something that would hold the marbles. It was like my house, okay, go in this room and I might have this basket here, I might have that, because I'm making baskets all the time, and they're used for various things around the house, and what can I empty out and what can I use, and I thought it very much reflected my real life, so I was hoping it would be a little more broad too, but for me at least, it was more real life.